What is up, party people? We are back with part 4 of our animal form and function unit. We're focusing on our endocrine, digestive, and urinary systems today. We're going to start with our endocrine system. The endocrine system is a complex network of glands that produce and release hormones into the bloodstream and other bodily fluids, primarily the bloodstream. And they do this to coordinate essential body functions such as growth, development, the sympathetic and parasympathetic regulations, metabolism, and overall homeostatic equilibrium. A hormone, which is our primary part of the endocrine system, is a chemical signaling compound. It's a ligand, and it's produced by endocrine cells, and it binds to the membrane or intracellular hormone receptors, which then trigger specific cellular responses. It's important to note that the endocrine system is much slower compared to the nervous system, but the effects of the hormones last longer than the nervous system signals do. Hormones can be lipids, amino acids, or peptide-based. Each has their own characteristics for various processes. How do hormones work? Well, starting off, the endocrine cells receive a signal to produce and secrete a hormone molecule. The signals can be from the nervous system or other hormones, so meaning the endocrine system released a hormone that then triggers another hormone, or the nervous system triggers a hormone to just be released on its own. 2, the secreted hormones will pass through the tissue fluids to their target cell. They know where they want to go. Most hormones are released and transported by blood through the circulatory system. And then 3, hormone molecules will bind to the membrane-bound or intracellular receptors, which triggers the desired response. And the cell may be another endocrine cell, which could trigger the production of another hormone. So this sends us back to step 1, where the signals can be from the nervous system or other hormones. You might be thinking, well, if the hormones are just randomly traveling through the bloodstream, wouldn't they just connect to random cells? I'm glad you asked. The answer is no. And the reasoning behind that is because these are specialized ligands and specialized receptors. They are only going to fit where they are meant to fit. So the specific receptor to the specific hormone, once it senses that that specific hormone is coming, it's like, oh, that's my buddy. And they connect to each other, and they're not going to connect to any other thing because that's not their buddy. Hormone regulation. There are some really important things within this section. The primary one being the hypothalamus. And this is the part of the brain that receives signals directly through the nervous system and produces hormones, which then regulate the production of other hormones, so promoting or inhibiting hormones. Hormonal stimuli is the presence of one hormone, which then triggers the production and secretion of another hormone. Neural stimuli is direct stimulation of the endocrine cells for the production and secretion. Humoral stimuli, not hormonal, humoral. This is the changes in bodily fluids that trigger hormone production, so like blood glucose levels. And then we have these again, our negative feedback and our positive feedback. Our negative feedback is where most hormones are regulated through negative feedback loops. So again, this is a self-regulating system where the hormones will be released and continue to release until whatever they were trying to either bring up or bring down reaches that set point, and then they will shut off. And they will wait until it either increases or decreases again, diverging from that set point to then start back up. Our positive feedback loops is where some hormones are regulated through our positive feedback processes, meaning they are stimulating the production of other hormones or higher levels of some hormone. So one hormone comes in, and then it stimulates the process of more and more and more. But again, through all of these systems, we rarely see positive, so the majority are negative feedback loops. Common hormones. These are the primary ones that we see all throughout the endocrine system, and these are the only ones that we actually need to know for the test. The first is estrogen, which regulates female reproductive systems, and it's responsible for female gender characteristics. Testosterone is responsible for muscle and bone development, as well as repair, and male gender characteristics. Melatonin regulates our internal clock through the regulation of our sleep-wake cycle. You might have heard of melatonin before, and most people will take it to induce sleep, to start that internal clock and get it going. Now, if you actually want some smart tips, my best tip for you, which I learned from our class lecture today, is that if you have a set schedule or just steps that you take, a routine every night before bed where you're slowly getting into a darker and darker and darker either room or situation, then that melatonin is going to start to kick in and recognize it's nighttime. That means sleep. Let's go to sleep. But if you're up on your tablet or your phone or your laptop scrolling on TikTok, probably not going to kick in because there's too much light going on. And finally, our epinephrine, or adrenaline. It's a critical neurotransmitter, and it's involved in the flight or fight processes. Now for our endocrine system anatomy. We kind of talked about a few of these already, but we're going to touch on them again, starting with our hypothalamus. It synthesizes and secretes regulatory hormones that control the endocrine cells in the anterior pituitary gland. Next we have is our pituitary gland, which is located directly below the hypothalamus, and it's connected to the pituitary stalk, and it's split between the anterior and posterior pituitary. The pineal gland is a tiny pine cone shaped gland at the center of the brain, and it produces melatonin in response to darkness. Our thyroid gland is the butterfly shaped gland located in the neck and the larynx, and it's in front of the trachea. So whenever you go to the doctors and you're sick and they touch your neck, they're actually touching your thyroid glands to see if it's inflamed because, well, if it is, that means you're probably sicker than you originally thought you were. So let's hope that it's not inflamed. And if it's inflamed for a long period of time, you might want to go to the doctor and get that checked out because that's a signal of dysfunction. Moving on to our adrenal gland. This is associated with and located on top of the kidneys, and it includes the adrenal cortex on the outer layer and adrenal medulla on the inner layer. Our pancreas is located between the stomach and the small intestines in the endocrine system. It produces glucagon and insulin. Both are hormones that regulate blood glucose levels. So this is when you eat. These are either produced or not produced depending on the rises and falls of our blood glucose levels. Our gonads produce hormones related to gender characteristics. So males, we have testes, and females, ovaries. Secondary endocrine organs are organs that have primary functions in other systems, but they also have secondary roles in the endocrine system, like the heart, the kidneys, the thymus, the gonads, and the adipose tissue. All of them are involved in the endocrine system, but they're not the main ones. We still include them because they're important to the endocrine system. Overall, the endocrine system is a highly complex process, and it's vital to many organ systems and homeostatic functions, which will be covered more in specific organ system presentations later on. Moving on to our digestive system. Animals must acquire raw materials and energy that is necessary for survival. To obtain these materials, they need to consume other organisms, and animals are classified primarily based on their diets, and we have 3 different types of diets. The first is herbivore, plant-based diets, carnivore, meat-based or eating other animals, and omnivores, which eat both plants and other animals. And based on these primary diets, animals have distinct adaptations related to their diet. The first is going to be for carnivores and omnivores, primarily carnivores. They have forward-facing eyes because it's more prevalent in animals that hunt for their food. And then the overarching one, that's probably the easiest to remember, are the teeth. Herbivores have flattened teeth because they're grinding out the cellulose. Carnivores have sharp teeth for gripping and tearing, and most of them also have claws or sharp talons to grip and grab their prey. Omnivores have both. In the back, we have our molars, which are for grinding, and in the front, we have our canines on either side of our mouth, and those are for the gripping and tearing parts. So you can see how we're both carnivores and omnivores. Nutrition. Energy is the major reason animals eat food. It's really kind of the only reason, unless you think about humans and just a tasty food. Me personally, I like tacos. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. The primary molecule is glucose, which is processed into ATP. Hopefully this is recalling some of our earlier units, but if not, it's okay because we're not focusing on all of the in-depth processes of ATP, glucose, and cellular respiration. Anyway, we consume carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are usually more complex, and they can be broken down into glucose through the digestive processes. Raw materials, on the other hand, are for cellular processes, and it's the other primary reason that animals consume foods. We have organic molecules, which are carbon-based, carbs, proteins, lipids, and they're broken down into their individual components for use of animal cells. We have essential nutrients, and nutrients are nutrients that aren't able to be produced by the body, or at least not in a high enough quantity that it satisfies our need, so we have to obtain them through food. And then this breaks down into our vitamins, which are small organic molecules that serve as coenzymes, so lipids are water soluble. And then our minerals are essential inorganic, they're not carbon-based molecules, and we have to get these from consuming food. Invertebrate digestive systems. We have either the gastrovascular cavity or the alimentary canal. Starting with our gastrovascular cavity, it's the simplest form. There is a tube or cavity with only a single opening that serves both as the mouth and the anus. And cells that line the cavity produce enzymes that help break down food and also engulf the food particles. So animals that fit in this category would be coral, jellyfish, and flatworms. The alimentary canal is a more complex digestive system, still less complex than our vertebrates. It has a tube with a mouth at one end and the anus at the other end. The ingested food is stored in a crop, and then it's churned and digested in the gizzard. And then it passes through the intestines where the nutrients are absorbed and the waste is excreted through the anus. And the animal for this one would be an earthworm. Vertebrate digestion systems are far more complex because we've adapted based on our diets. Larger animals have a monogastric digestive system, meaning one stomach. They have a single stomach. The digestion begins with ingestion, so teeth for grinding and enzymes break down the food, so our saliva, our salivatory glands, and then it continues through multiple structures. Our stomach, which has acid, which further breaks things down, and then our small intestines, which absorb nutrients, and then our large intestines, which absorb some of those vitamins and minerals, and then the waste is excreted through the anus. Some animals, however, aren't monogastrics. Some animals have specialized systems or structures, so avian birds, they don't have teeth to grind food, and their stomach actually has two chambers. So one is for undigested food, which can be regurgitated, and two, the waste exits through the cloaca, which has both waste types. Instead of having one for urine and one for solid waste, they both come out of the cloaca. Ruminants are herbivores, so think cows and sheep. They are constantly chewing food to grind up the cellulose and make it easier for digestion. And they actually have a 4-chambered stomach. Some people say, oh, cows have 4 stomachs. It's technically they have 1 stomach with 4 chambers. But it's okay, I won't argue on the semantics of it. It's okay. Anyway, their 4 stomachs have enzymes and bacteria that aid in the digestion of the cellulose because it is so difficult to digest cellulose. Humans can't even do it. So if you ingest cellulose from, say, celery, it's just going to be excreted. Cud is the regurgitated, partially digested food, which is then chewed further to aid in digestion and nutrient absorption. Digestive systems and anatomy, so mammals and humans specifically. We have the oral cavity, which is our mouth, where the food enters and the digestive system begins. Our teeth grind the food through chewing, and our salivatory glands produce saliva, which then lubricates the food particles for swallowing, and it contains enzymes which begin to break down the food. And then our tongue moves the food around to aid in the chewing and swallowing process. Our esophagus is the tubular organ that connects the mouth to the stomach, and the way that we get the food down is through peristalsis, which is the wave-like movement of the smooth muscle that moves the material, the food, fluids, and waste, through the digestive tract. And this is throughout the entire digestive tract, but we're mentioning it for the esophagus primarily, but it's also in the small and large intestines. Our stomach is the sac-like organ that produces the gastric juices and is responsible for the bulk of digestion and absorption of nutrients. Small when empty, but it can actually expand up to 20 times its size when it's full. And we have seen where competitive food eaters can actually increase the size of their stomach by small changes over time of eating more and more food. No, I do not recommend you try it. And then chyme is a mix of gastric juices and partially digested food, which moves from the stomach to the small intestines and further down the digestive tract. The small intestines are the long tube-like organ where the digestion of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates is completed. The villi, think about microvilli, but this is bigger, are the finger-like projections that increase the surface area for more efficient nutrient absorption. The small intestine is separated into 3 portions. The duodenum is the first portion, and it has digestive enzymes from the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder, and it continues to break down food. The jejunum is the second portion, and the bulk of chemical digestion and absorption occurs in this section. And then the ileum is the last portion, and it has bile, salts, and vitamins that are absorbed. The large intestine, or the colon, is the tube-like organ that reabsorbs water from the undigested food and processes the waste. The rectum is the terminal end of the large intestine, which stores waste until defecation. And then the anus is the opening at the end of the digestive tract that serves as the exit point for digested waste. Accessory organs, they add secretions that help break down food. So think our salivatory glands, our liver, our pancreas, and gallbladder. The following are controlled by the endocrine system in response to the food consumed. Our liver, it's involved in our digestion and detoxification of blood. Digestion produces bile, which is an enzyme that breaks down lipids in the duodenum and processes vitamins and fats. Our pancreas, it excretes pancreatic juices, which are alkaline, and they neutralize the highly acidic gastric juices in chyme that contain enzymes that break down proteins and carbohydrates. And then our gallbladder stores the bile and concentrates bile salts and helps break down fatty acids in the chyme. Here is a diagram with all of our labeled parts. You don't need to know every single teeny tiny part of this, but it might help you to visualize where is everything? How does all of this fit inside of us? Well, here you go. Our digestive process. We've talked a lot about the parts that are involved, but what is the actual process? What are the steps we take? The first is ingestion, which is taking in food through the mouth. Next is digestion. It's the mechanical and chemical biological breakdown of food into smaller fragments for the absorption of nutrients. Then our absorption. We break down the nutrients and it's cross the muscle epithelium of the digestive tract into the bloodstream or other tissue for the use in cellular processes throughout the body. And then finally is elimination. All the undigested food is dehydrated in the colon and stored in the colon until neural stimulation triggers the release of waste through the anus via peristalsis. Different classes or organic compounds vary in their digestive processes. That, what we previously talked about, was the overall. However, carbs, it begins in the mouth where enzymes begin to break down the complex carbs into simpler molecules. There's no significant digestion that takes place in the stomach, but further breakdown does take place in the duodenum into even simpler molecules where they can be absorbed. Proteins, the bulk of proteins, in fact, are digested in the stomach, and it's completed in the duodenum, allowing for absorption of amino acids through the small intestines. Lipids start in the stomach, with the bulk of digestion occurring in the small intestines through emulsification. And then vitamins, which are lipid-soluble vitamins, are absorbed in the same way as lipids. Water-soluble vitamins are absorbed directly through the small intestine. Control of digestive processes. Neural control. Sensory input triggers pre-digestive processes in preparation of ingestion and digestion. So think salivation. It's the production of gastric juices, our preparation of peristalsis muscles. All of these things help us quicken the process of ingesting and digesting food. Peristalsis is controlled by the brain, in fact. So when you swallow, it's a voluntary and involuntary action. Our neural signals from the stomach also communicate, which has the feeling of being full. So if you eat super duper fast, then your brain might think, oh, I'm full, I can't eat anymore. But if you eat slowly over time, then you can actually figure out how much more can I take. Or maybe you just eat a little bit and you're done. Neural control of enzyme release during the various digestive phases as well. So this would be like cephalic, gastric, and intestinal. Hormonal controls. Our endocrine glands trigger the release of various hormones during different phases of ingestion. Specific hormones trigger the release or stoppage of HCl in the presence or absence of protein in the stomach. The presence of acidic chyme triggers the release of pancreatic juices and bile from the gallbladder. Foods high in lipids trigger the release of hormones that slow digestion to allow more time for digestion and absorption. Osmoregulation. It's the process of maintaining osmotic balance, which is the balance of water and salts, across membranes within the body's fluids. Water, electrolytes, and non-electrolytes contribute to the osmotic balance. An electrolyte is the solutes that dissociate into ions. They're electrically charged. When they dissolve into water, they dissociate into ions. An example would be table salt, NaCl, which dissociates into Na+ and Cl-. The movement of water and electrolytes are based on proper maintenance of specific osmotic balance, which is needed by different tissues, so hyper or hypo or isotonic. Blood is actually isotonic, so cells maintain their shape and function, which is why it's vitally important that we maintain that balance of our blood, because if our blood dips into hyper or hypotonic situations, all of that blood is defective and it can cause some serious issues. But it's okay because we have our kidneys, which help us filter our blood so that we maintain that isotonic balance. Water is constantly entering and leaving the body through drinking and food, actually, and then sweat, urine, and feces. And all of this requires the system to maintain a homeostatic variable. Osmoregulation includes various hormonal cues that help in the process. So epinephrine and norepinephrine, it can decrease kidney functions to temporarily stop by vasoconstriction. Renin increases blood pressure by acting as an angiotensinogen. Angiotensin affects multiple processes and it increases blood pressure. Aldosterone prevents the loss of sodium in water. Vasopressin prevents water loss. And a natriuretic peptide decreases blood pressure by acting as a vasodilator and increasing the glomerular filtration rate, which decreases sodium reabsorption in the kidneys. Several organs have roles in osmoregulation. The lungs expel small amounts of water in vapors while breathing through the expulsion of mucus. So when you breathe, when you talk, you're actually expelling microscopic amounts of water. Our skin, water and electrolytes are lost through sweating. Kidneys. They're the primary organ involved in osmoregulation, and they're part of the urinary system. They filter and purify blood. Urine is actually resulting aqueous filtrate, which travels from the kidneys through the ureters to the bladder, where it's then stored later for the expulsion from the body through the urethra. Kidneys, there are a pair of bean-shaped organs that serve as functional organs of the urinary system. They're divided into 3 distinct regions. The renal cortex, which is the outer layer where filtration begins, and it contains the bulk of the nephrons. Our renal medulla is the inner area containing the renal pyramids, and it concentrates urine and maintains salt balance. Our renal pelvis is the funnel-like dilated proximal part of the ureter that collects urine before it exits to the bladder. And then supporting structures include the renal capsule, which is the outer layer of the kidney, the renal artery, the in, and vein, which is out, high volume blood supply. So the renal artery goes in and the renal vein is going out. And then the ureter is the exit tube for the final urine. Take a look at the diagram to the side to kind of comprehend what in the world am I talking about. A nephron, I mentioned this on the last slide, it's the functional unit of the kidney. We have approximately 1 million per kidney. Glomerulus, I'm butchering that, but we're going to go with it, is in high pressure, and it's high pressure capillary bed that acts as the initial filter. Bowman's capsule is the cup-like sac that catches the filtrate, and our tubules are the reabsorbing process where we retake the nutrients and secreting waste. Glomerular filtration is where the blood enters the glomerulus under high pressure, acting like a salve, and then forcing water and small solutes out of the blood into the nephron. Our tubular reabsorption is where the filtered fluids travel through the tubules, the wall of the tubules, then pump the essential nutrients back into the surrounding capillaries so that we're not losing excessive amounts of glucose or water. In fact, we want to keep those. And then our tubular secretion is the final fine-tuning where the blood identifies specific waste products that didn't get filtered out initially, and then it pumps them back directly into the tubules. Finally, excretion. It's the remaining fluid, urine, which flows into the collecting ducts and moves to the renal pelvis and travels down the ureter to the bladder. Other animal excretion systems include flame cells, which are the cup-shaped excretory cells in some invertebrates like flatworms. Our nephridia are the tubular kidney-like excretory organs in invertebrates like annelids. I'm just butchering all words today. Please excuse me. And then Malpighian tubules are the excretory and osmoregulatory organs in insects consisting of tubules lined with microvilli. Bioenergetics and homeostasis. An animal's body's major systems work in a continuous feedback loop to manage energy and maintain a stable internal environment. The body is a biological machine, and it converts fuel into function while constantly correcting for internal and external changes. Here is a short kind of summary-like table to explain everything that we went over. Make sure to go back and check out the parts of the video if you need further explanation or you don't remember something mentioned in this table. The nervous system, it's command and control. It processes sensory data and coordinates rapid response, but they don't last long. It's attempting to restore balance. Sensory is environmental input. It detects changes, low blood sugar, cold temperatures, dehydration to trigger a response like thirst. Our endocrine system, it's our metabolic regulation. It releases hormones to signal energy storage or use, metabolic functions, and osmotic equilibrium. Our digestive system, it's fuel acquisition and water balance. It breaks down macromolecules into glucose and fatty acids for ATP production, and it contributes to osmoregulation through water ingestion and absorption. Finally, our urinary system is our waste and water balance. It filters metabolic byproducts and regulates blood pH and electrolytes to maintain the internal osmotic balance. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to go back and check out all of the other videos on this unit so that you can ace our test.